Earth is doomed. A devastating force is coming, and we're running out of time. As civilization crumbles around us and our planet is destroyed, can we build spacecraft to take us to new, habitable worlds? Can humankind escape annihilation? Can we evacuate Earth?
보는 거 좋아하지?
아빠, 여기?
그래, 여기. 잠시 한번 볼래? 잘 보이니?
예.
Is that a shooting star?
Oh, wow, yeah, look at that one. The ups and downs that we've experienced as a species are nothing compared to what the universe can throw at us. Now, there's a whole list of bad things that can happen to a planet like the Earth.
Get in the trunk. Get in the trunk. Get in the trunk.
If we were suddenly bombarded with a shower of large objects from space, that would be catastrophic for Earth, and it would mean many different things, but none of them are good.
One of the most extreme possibilities we can think of would involve an object that we call a neutron star. Now, a neutron star is incredibly compact, and that size means that its brightness can be 1,000,000 times less than that of the sun.
A neutron star is a stellar corpse. A star much more massive than the sun burns through its fuel extremely rapidly. And at the end of its life, when it runs out of fuel, the entire core of the star simply collapses.
This creates one type of supernova in a massive stellar explosion.
If we determined that a neutron star was really headed in our direction, that's very bad news. You can't blow it up, you can't change its direction, you can get out of its way, or you can suffer the horrendous consequences of being destroyed by a neutron star.
One of the problems with our current age, which can be a good thing depending upon what the issue is or a bad thing, is that people are very cynical. We don't particularly believe what we see and hear. And you can imagine you'd have various people, various scientists get on the talk shows and say, no, this is really happening.
Do you mean the same thing could happen to us?
Yes, I believe it will. And just about every astronomer in the world believes it too. We have all read the same data.
So within a week or two, people will believe it. But the real question is, what will they do about it?
And when would this happen?
By our best calculations, 75 years. 75 years. The Earth will be destroyed. This is the end of Earth.
If nature throws something at us that is so utterly catastrophic that the Earth would be utterly destroyed, that would compel us, I think, to try to go elsewhere.
It boggles the mind. Can we really rescue 7 billion people? You have to remember, only about 600 people have ever gone into space in the entire history of the human race.
And then there's the problem of the distance that we're going to have to send them. We're probably going to have to go 6, 7, 8 light years at least, and that's 40 trillion miles.
One thing is pretty certain. We're not going to get there using the space vehicles that we have now.
To make this work, we're going to have to build an absolutely colossal ship, and we're going to have to develop a new type of engine to propel it. The question is, can we?
Any plan to build a new space drive comes with great risks. But with the fate of humanity at stake, we're going to have to accept those risks, however great.
We've titled the project Horizon, and it represents the cutting edge in spacecraft propulsion technologies. We're going to be looking at a few approaches right now. Plasma. Promising, but it poses some real problems with regard to fuel and fuel storage, but this is a contender.
To make a rocket able to accelerate you to high speeds, the faster you can shoot the exhaust out, the better off you are. The idea of a plasma rocket is that we'll use electricity to accelerate our gas. And so then you can shoot things out to very large velocities.
But plasma, while it is more powerful, would probably require a lot of fuel. So really that puts us back to square one with the fuel problem.
Solar sails. This technology has the advantage of substantial research, especially in the last 15 years.
A solar sail derives its propulsion from sunlight. You can't feel it when you're out walking on a sunny day, but the light that's reflecting off of you is pushing on you. And we've looked at designs of solar sails that, if they're large enough and lightweight enough, can get to very, very high speeds.
But the solar sail has an Achilles heel, and that is, it receives its acceleration by radiation pressure from the sunlight from the sun. And as you get farther away from the sun, that radiation pressure gets weaker. The sunlight gets weaker as you move away. It's kind of like driving on a long, lonely highway and there's no gas station suddenly for many, many miles.
There's another candidate for an interstellar drive, and this one seems to come straight out of science fiction.
Antimatter. Antimatter is the fondest hope of every propulsion engineer for the last 2 decades.
Antimatter is kind of the mirror image of matter.
It has the same mass as a normal particle, like a proton, an electron, but it has different charge and spin. And what is really interesting is if you bring a matter particle and an antiparticle together, as soon as they interact, they annihilate each other, and this releases enormous amounts of energy.
But antimatter presents serious challenges. All that energy is really, really dangerous, and we don't necessarily know how to control it, much less funnel it through an engine.
When we make it, we have to store it in a vacuum chamber and contain it in some very strong magnetic fields so that it doesn't interact with the walls of the chamber. Because if it does, it's going to annihilate and produce energy. And just in layman's terms, it becomes a very, very large bomb.
So here we are. We can't use chemical rockets. Solar cells eventually will run out of thrust. and antimatter is too dangerous. So that's pretty bad news for a vessel that's designed to travel to distant stars.
Thank you all for coming. We're going to break now and get into our discussion groups.
But we might have an ace up our sleeves. There's a technology that might work very well. The irony is that this technology is not new. It's over 60 years old, and it might just hold the answer.
Today, whatever you do, wherever you may go, you are a part of atomic warfare.
So during the Manhattan Project in the 1940s, there was a physicist, Stanislaw Ulam, and he proposed launching a massive space vehicle that was propelled by nuclear bombs.
A number of scientists, including Freeman Dyson, took this concept to the next level, imagining a spacecraft that would be propelled by nuclear explosions. And they called it Project Orion.
Orion is really very simple in concept. Imagine that you have a very large spacecraft, and on the back of it you put big plates with big shock absorbers.
And what you do is you take nuclear bombs and you eject them from the spacecraft, and they go some distance behind, perhaps tens or hundreds of meters. They explode, and the blast wave hits this pressure plate. And you set off multiple of these detonations, so it's bang, 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 and the thing gradually starts to move along and accelerates up to a high velocity.
The fastest man-made object now is the Voyager probe, which is going at 0.006 times the speed of light. At that speed, it'll take it tens of thousands of years to reach another star. But with Project Orion, we can go much faster.
Studies that have been done show that if you were to detonate a bomb behind it once every 3 seconds for 10 days, you would get up to a significant fraction of the speed of light.
To conceive and build such a vessel is going to take cooperation on a scale never before seen in the world. We're talking about natural resources. We're talking about economies of the world having to give up the concept of money, working toward a common good.
It the Horizon Project, and we've been granted exclusive access to show you this sprawling compound as it arises from the soil here in Florida. They've already dubbed this complex Starship City. In a few months, this site will be secured by the military, and the fight to save humankind will begin.
You bring the community to Starship City. You bring all of your scientists and engineers there. And then you start to do design work. They need to have homes to live in. And it's not just them, it's their families, because they have wives or husbands and children which might come with them. And it becomes a massive community which needs supporting.
Now, the first order of business at Starship City will be to figure out how to actually build the Orion and make it work.
Well, the first thing you'll have to do is increase the production of plutonium. You'd have to design the bomblets to be specifically used for Orion. You wouldn't be able to use decommissioned nuclear weapons from our arsenal, so you've got a whole new design effort for building these.
As you can see, the bomblets are going to be delivered to the pusher plate.
The plates that are used for propulsion have to serve a couple of purposes, and that makes them complicated to design. One is they have to transfer the momentum of the detonation of the bomb going off to push the spacecraft. They have to provide radiation shielding for the occupants of the spacecraft. Being around a hydrogen bomb going off is not exactly a healthy environment to be in unless you're behind a lot of shielding. And it has to survive that. Multiple detonations, one every 3 seconds, as this thing is being propelled.
One detonation every 3 seconds could get us to a respectable fraction of the speed of light. possibly even 7%.
So while we're perfecting the propulsion system, the next question will be, what exactly is it pushing? How big will it be? And what conditions will we need inside of it to prepare for the passengers?
Ever see guys that have come down from the International Space Station that have been in space for 3 months, when they get out of their capsule, they have to be supported. They literally will fall down. They're so weak.
Now we're talking about an entire lifetime spent in zero gravity. And so there's a whole host of problems. Number one will be the fact that I'm not sure if we can actually have men and women produce children in this environment. The reproductive system relies on gravity.
We don't even know what a body that grew in zero gravity from infancy or even from in the womb would look like. Would it operate like ours? Would it even be feasible to give birth in interstellar space? We have to assume that we will be raising at least several generations of humanity in space, and this is something that's never been done before.
Fortunately, there are fairly easy ways to simulate the effects of gravity, and one of those is through rotation.
Gerard O'Neill is a professor of physics at Princeton University who postulated the design for a space colony where people would live on the inside surface of a rotating cylinder to produce artificial gravity.
This has all been simulated in computers, and we're fairly confident that this cylinder will maintain its pressure.
Light is another obvious issue. There's not much sunlight, even if you travel even just a few days away from the sun. So we're going to need some artificial lighting. But that's not as big of a problem as you might think.
We could run a rod down the center of the ship, which would be like the sun according to a daily cycle, because humans and plants and other animals rely on the cycles of day and night for their rhythms of life, for their survival.
Who gets to go, to me, is the big question. How do we select the people who get to go on this escape trip, if you will?
One of the first things that we would want to do is screen the DNA of as many people as possible. We would like to ideally collect this from all over the planet, from the entire population, if it was feasible.
You're looking at essentially a founding group of people, human beings, on some distant planet. So the first thing you really want to consider is their survivability, which a genetic profile will at least give you a clue to.
The people that survive are going to have to be kind of biologically perfect in a way, as perfect as they could be, because we're talking about a survival over a long period of time.
In some places, you would need trained medical personnel to collect the samples and do the screening. But in other cases, people might be able to send in the materials themselves. We could create an evacuation eligibility kit and mail it to as many people as possible. It would be a simple kit with a pin or swab stick, an instruction card, and a return envelope. And they all get shipped back to Starship City. Genetics aren't the only criteria for getting into this group. There are certain skill sets that will be required. First of all, you need a crew to fly the ship and to maintain all of its various subsystems. Doctors, engineers, pilots, scientists, medical technicians, medical researchers, although we'll probably make those determinations further down the road.
No matter what criteria is selected, once you start deciding who gets to go, you're deciding who doesn't go. And that is a lot of people. In fact, it's 99% of the people who are not going to get to go.
Wealthy elites would largely shape the priorities in this endeavor. and would be involved very closely in selecting who would be the group of survivors that would actually make it into space.
There are going to be lots of nations, lots of countries around the world with very few people selected to go on this journey.
There will be populations of people who are already resource poor who will want to be part of this project but won't be selected. And the struggle for resources is usually a violent one. There's a lot of room for tragedy.
You could just have a simple lottery in which anyone had an equal chance of getting into that. But it would be extremely messy, and wars could well break out over who would get on that ship.
Regimes might say, like, you know what? I have a nuclear bomb. If you don't do as I say, the world is gonna end. The times are ending. It's time to move on and do it now. So you have two different scenarios. One that, you know, people are gonna get together and have the best of humanity. On the other hand, it might be the worst of humanity.
Once we know that our system is doomed, we have to begin looking for other solar systems with planets that could support us.
We believe there must be other planets out there like ours. This was something that was only a philosophical statement 20 years ago. Now we suspect that there are many places like the Earth out there. The only question is when we'll find them and how close the nearest one will be.
Finding another planet won't be easy, but we already have telescopes in space looking for Earth-like planets orbiting other stars.
The most prolific one right now is the Kepler Space Telescope. Kepler is a 1-meter space telescope in an Earth trailing orbit. And Kepler looks at 150,000 stars every 6 seconds and looks for a tiny drop in brightness when the planet goes in front of the star.
Every so often, by chance, a planet may pass between us and its parent star. In doing so, it blocks a tiny bit of the light from that star. If we monitor the star, we can actually see that change in light coming from the star, and it tells us that there is a planet there.
Kepler now has 2,000 candidate planets. It has planets that are the size of the Earth and smaller.
That's potentially a lot of new homes, but the problem is that Kepler's targets are very far away.
Kepler targets are at distances of 1,000 to 1,500 light years, so while this is a great experiment for giving us the odds of finding something, it's not a great experiment for finding where nearby we could go.
The real golden nugget at the end of this search, of course, is to find an Earth-like world in what's called the Goldilocks zone.
The Goldilocks zone refers to a zone around a star where the temperature is just right for liquid water at the surface of the planet.
Liquid water is a critical piece of biology. It's an important part of the chemistry of life itself.
And even if we did find a planet that was in the habitable zone of its parent star, it had the right temperature, it had the right surface gravity, and maybe even a thriving biosphere, there's still going to be a lot of unknowns that could kill any newcomer.
One big one, for example, is wind speed. You know, as humans, we can barely function in 50-mile-per-hour winds. Some planets may have winds upwards of 200 miles per hour all the time.
We could get there and discover that the things we thought pointed towards a nice temperate environment were actually wrong. Maybe it's a planet of crazy chemistry and strange volcanism that's completely uninhabitable.
At some point, we're basically going to have to take what amounts to a massive gamble.
So that's it. Does anybody have any reservations about recommending this?
We're just going to have to trust our instruments, trust our measurements, and just select the location and just go.
This is the best chance. Nothing else even comes close.
Because in this situation, there's going to be no time to go back and forth on our decision making. The human race cannot die due to paralysis of analysis.
As the neutron star comes into the system, matter, bits of rock, asteroid, comet, you name it, in our solar system will be attracted to that object. But as they hit the surface of the neutron star, it's like setting off nuclear bombs. So this object is going to begin to pump out radiation, which is going to scorch everything in its path.
So we can find ourselves in a situation where as this neutron star approaches us, the radiation from the neutron star would be digging through the Earth's atmosphere and digging a hole in the atmosphere. And if we find ourselves in this case where the beam coming from the neutron star sweep by the planet Earth, God help us.
Most people think of launching a spaceship as a rocket that goes up in one piece and reaches orbit. Well, for something as big as this, that's not going to work. But luckily, there are other ways to build a spaceship. It really makes a lot more sense to put it together in pieces and parts and launch those into space and assemble them there.
When you get out into space where you don't have weather, you don't have the Earth's gravity, you don't have to put as much mass and waste time designing it for two environments. The environment for transit through the atmosphere and then space. You just can concentrate on what it's going to take to keep it in space.
We probably won't be able to build the entire ship at Starship City. What we're going to have to do is we're going to have to distribute the manufacturing all around the world, creating what is essentially a global assembly line. And that probably is the only chance we have of meeting our deadline.
The biggest challenge is going to be the systems engineering, putting the logistics together and getting all the pieces to fit. They're going to have to use different tooling and different engineering processes, and they have to make sure that once they get into space, tab A fits into part B and everything connects and works properly. The last thing you want to do is find out that your pieces don't fit together properly when you get to space.
Launching the sections of this ship into space, that's the easy part. We've done that before. But even with the most advanced robotics that we have, assembling those things into a starship is something that's going to require human coordination of a huge scale.
I personally don't believe we'd be able to assemble our spaceship just totally robotically without people.
That is absolutely gorgeous. 0G and I feel fine.
You can do a lot robotically, but sometimes you just got to have a person on site to make things work. But you'll probably have to have somewhere on the craft astronauts outside in spacesuits 24/7, overseeing the construction, doing repairs and maintenance as the spacecraft's coming together.
And that could be a very dangerous situation because we have space junk flying around the Earth at high speed.
First pair and second pair both have successfully jettisoned the vehicle. Everything is looking good.
These pieces are moving at orbital speeds, which is on the order of about 5 to 6 or even 7 miles a second. And that's faster than any bullet you can fire on the ground. And would do tremendous damage if it hit you.
Remember, this ark has to sustain the lives of every survivor in the human race. So it's going to need to be supplied with everything they're going to need for decades on their journey.
Air, water, food. If we don't have those things, we're not going to make it, period. But fortunately, the first two, air and water, are essentially the same thing, scientifically speaking.
You can make oxygen easily by just putting an electrical current through water, which is essentially what organisms do when they generate oxygen from photosynthesis. And if you have a nuclear power plant on a spaceship, you can generate electricity for a very, very long period of time, safely, and you can just hydrolyze the water to generate oxygen.
So we can breathe, and we have water. Now we have to figure out our food supply. As mundane as it seems, we've never done anything on this scale before, and certainly not in space. And every man, woman, and child on the ship stands a chance of dying if we don't figure it out.
You obviously can't take millions of cans of baked beans and frozen chicken burgers all the way to the stars. That's not viable.
You will not be eating meat in space. No steak in space. You can have a meat-flavored material, but you will not be eating meat in space. If you really are hungry for animal protein, you can get some good worms or some roaches. Insects have been a source of protein for humans for a long time.
The idea is that there would be some agriculture. But who knows? Maybe we'll come to enjoy insects and that kind of thing.
We have to consider growing crops. We certainly have to come up with new crops that are resistant to the radiation sources that will certainly be out there in space. We're going to have to come up with new seeds that are impervious perhaps to the microgravity environment.
Growing corn in space is not a viable option here. You're going to be growing algae. You're going to be eating chlorella crackers, little green thin wafers that'll taste like dried spinach on a good day.
The question of diet raises the importance of bringing along a few trillion more passengers on board. We're talking about bacteria.
It's critical that we would take a complement of microbes into space. It's absolutely essential for the survival of human life.
6 pounds of a typical human adult's weight is microorganisms. Without bacteria, we wouldn't even be able to perform simple functions like digesting our food.
Those organisms all evolved more than 2.5 billion years ago on this planet. They are the ones that made the planet habitable for all the other creatures on it. To take bacteria in space is quite easy, actually. You can take bacteria in very, very small vials, and they're stored in liquid nitrogen or some other very, very cold fluid. It's just like storing sperm in a sperm bank.
The thing you have to remember is that all of these programs have to take place at the same time. Building the ship, selecting a destination, solving supply problems, figuring out how to feed the evacuees. It all has to be simultaneously coordinated, or it's not going to get done. The neutron star isn't going to give us an extension.
We've got our tens of thousands of individuals, and we've got their food and water and air to breathe.
At this point, I think we would definitely want to board our craft. We're going to want to leave the planet.
It'll be an interesting challenge to keep the passengers and crew positive, especially in the early going.
The people that start off on the mission, possibly they're going to suffer from depression because the realization that their home world has been destroyed.
There will be friends, loved ones, places left behind, never to be seen again, and that's got to hurt everyone.
We're so lucky to be one of the few thousand intact families going. How could we not do it? It's the only choice we have.
For the first time, humans will be leaving their home. They'll be traveling for 60, 80, 100 years perhaps, in a large vessel with 250,000 people aboard. They've left behind perhaps family members. They've left behind places they grew up. I think it's very important that we maintain a family structure during this journey, that we allow individuals to form a home, if you will.
If we pull it off, the Ark ship is going to be a wonder unlike anything humans have ever created. The last wonder we'll ever create on Earth.
We're on the assumption that people are going to behave. But we have to be certain that we have some laws, that we have some rules, that we have a structure.
I think what would worry me the most is just the social cohesion of the group. Will they stay on task, or will they rebel and try to do something different, to turn the ship around, to give up, keeping people directed towards their goal all that time, not breaking up into factions on board the ship, not killing each other. The same problem we have in a city or in adjacent countries. That's what we've got to master.
Clearly, we will have individuals from multiple countries. Who's to say that the hatred and the problems that we have here on Earth will not befall us on this journey?
The obvious thing you need is governance. What's the laws that you take with you? Is it the Constitution of the United States? Is it the United Nations? What kind of political structure do you have on board? Do you want a democracy? This is a really interesting question, because you certainly don't want a dictator who's going to just rule everyone, and then he gets there and he's going to be the ruler of the planet and never step down. But at the same time, you need some kind of military structure that makes sure the orders are executed, because the people in charge are making very hard decisions in a military-like way. But if there was a democracy, perhaps they'll be outvoted as being the person that makes the decisions, and this can actually affect the success of the mission.
As a neutron star approaches the Earth, there are two things that are going to happen.
The internal core and the crust of the Earth would start to get heated up, and it would start to become molten, and this would result in earthquakes on a scale that we've never seen.
What will happen next is the neutron star's gravitational field will begin to tear away our planet.
Once the Earth's atmosphere, the Earth's oceans, and the Earth's crust start to become perturbed, it's going to kill people pretty quickly.
Then I think the Earth's crust will shatter. The hot interior of the planet will essentially spill out into the vacuum of space.
By the time the neutron star literally rips the Earth to pieces, everybody on the Earth is already going to be dead from radiation or volcanism or any number of other things. So there won't be anybody there to witness this event, except for the people, of course, on the Ark.
The material of a shredded Earth can do a couple of things. It may fall straight onto the neutron star and result in colossal explosions. It's also possible that it would enter into an orbit around the neutron star as a ring. So in fact, our planet could become a ring system .
Who's going to be there when we arrive?
The human life expectancy currently is about 70 years. So by the time we reach the distant planet, that is our target, chances are most of the original people who got on the Ark ship aren't going to be around.
Clearly those who were in their 50s and 60s when the journey began won't make it. Most likely to be the younger children.
You can imagine that being a very emotional experience because they know they've reached the end of their long journey and they were successful, but in some ways they've only started it.
Imagine the flood of emotions that these people are going to feel the first time they see the surface of this planet. But now they're tasked with doing something that's even more immense. Now they have to go down to this planet and rebuild human civilization on a new world.
A lot of people would say that thinking about building an interstellar ark and evacuating the planet is kind of a waste of time. I'm not sure that it's something we want to put a lot of effort into without a threat, but it's certainly something we need to be thinking about because sometime in the future, it's inevitable that we're going to want to leave the planet. Hopefully, without being forced to by a catastrophe.
This is a crazy thing to think about. It seems like science fiction. The end of the world, no going back, we have to escape, we have to evacuate Earth. But it's really impossible to say that it will never happen. And it's also interesting to think about because it's a question of whether we as a species will ever expand beyond the confines of the planet that gave birth to us. If you look at evolution on Earth, often great migrations and expansions of particular species are initiated because of some disaster that forces that species to move on. We may be the same. It may be that an event like this, as devastating as it is the one thing that ensures that our species will live forever as it propagates out into the universe.